The bioluminescent algae in the water filtration tubes cast a ghostly cyan glow over Zola Vance's face. At 3 a.m., the Azure Spire was a vertical graveyard of silence. Zola was 19, but her hands were calloused like those of a woman twice her age. Her job was external scrubber, a polite term for the laborers who risked their lives in the crushing depths to keep the city's thermal vents from clogging with salt crust and obsidian silt. Ethelgard was a marvel of the New World, a city built on a floating tectonic platform. But for those like Zola, who lived in the Rust Belt, the submerged slums tethered to the spire's underside, the city was a prison. Every credit she earned was funneled into a desperate cycle. Her father, Elias, a former master welder, was dying of deep lung, a condition where the high-pressure oxygen mix in the mines crystallized in the bronchi. Every breath he took cost 4 credits of medical-grade air. Her younger brother, Leo, was her only hope. He had the hands for clockwork, and she was determined to keep him in the trade school, far away from the pressurized suits that were killing their father. Zola had once been a spark, a child prodigy selected for the elite academy. She had a mathematical mind that saw patterns in chaos, translating raw data into mental architecture. But when the medical bills hit, the spark went out. She traded her stylus for a high-pressure scrub brush. To the elite who walked the glass floors of the spire, she was just a shadow in the water, a nameless silhouette of the labor that made their luxury possible. While scouring the exterior of the primary server vault, the heart of the city's digital wealth, Zola felt a strange vibration through the soles of her magnetic boots. It wasn't the steady thrum of the cooling fans. It was a stutter, a rhythmic, intentional pulse. She pressed her helmet against the reinforced glass. Inside the war room, the city's most powerful figures were gathered. Director Holloway, a woman whose suits cost more than a scrubber's lifetime earnings, stood alongside Chief Engineer Thorne. They were staring at a massive holographic display of the city's power grid. The display was dripping with red light. "The AI says it's a Stux variant leak," Thorne shouted, his voice muffled by the glass but audible through Zola's suitcom, which had accidentally snagged the room's internal frequency. "The oxygen scrubbers are failing. If we don't patch the code, the lower sectors will suffocate in 6 hours." Zola froze. She looked at the hardware outside. The leak wasn't in the code. She saw a hairline fracture in the Alpha 9 cooling pipe, vibrating at a frequency that shouldn't exist. The vibration was creating electrical interference, ghost logic, that the AI was misinterpreting as a virus. Zola knew the protocol. Scrubbers do not speak. Scrubbers do not exist. If she interfered, she could be blacklisted, leaving Elias to suffocate and Leo to starve. But if she stayed silent, the Rust Belt, her home, would be the first to lose oxygen. The Spire's elite would have backup tanks. Her father would have nothing. She remembered Elias teaching her how to weld as a child. "A system is a living thing, Zola. It doesn't lie to you. Only people do." She reached for the emergency maintenance panel on the vault's exterior. With a few practiced movements, she bypassed the biometric lock using a jumper wire she'd fashioned from scrap. She opened a direct audio line to the war room. "Director Holloway," Zola's voice crackled, distorted by the water and the suit's vocoder. "You're fighting a ghost. The error isn't in your software. It's physical cavitation in the Alpha 9 pipe. You're looking for a hacker when you should be looking for a plumber." The war room froze. Thorne looked around, baffled. "Who the hell is on this channel?" "Security, trace that." "There's no time to trace," Zola snapped, her mathematical mind taking over. "The pipe is vibrating at 440 Hz. It's creating a resonance loop that's scrambling your sensors. If you don't vent the pressure in the next 3 minutes, the Alpha 9 will burst, and the server vault will flood. Then you won't just have an oxygen problem, you'll have a sinking city." Thorne scoffed, his ego wounded. "I have a doctorate in hyperfluidics. This is just some disgruntled laborer trying to sound smart. Ignore it." But Holloway, noticing the pressure gauge on the wall actually flickering in time with Zola's described frequency, hesitated. "Thorne, look at the manifold. It's glowing." Vent it. Now. Thorn reluctantly hit the override. A massive plume of white bubbles erupted from the vent near Zola's feet, nearly knocking her into the abyss. The red lights on the holographic map immediately turned amber, then a steady, peaceful green. The city's heartbeat stabilized. "Bring that diver in," Holloway ordered. 10 minutes later, Zola stood on the dry, polished floor of the spire. She stripped off her helmet, her dark hair matted with sweat, her eyes blinking in the harsh artificial sun. Security teams surrounded her, but Holloway stepped forward. She looked at Zola's badge. Level 1 maintenance. Vance Z. "You saved the server vault," Holloway said, her voice unreadable. "And you did it by bypassing a Class A security lock. Why should I hire you instead of arresting you?" "Because," Zola said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands, "Thorn missed the error because he only looks at what the computer tells him. I know this city because I touch its skin every day. Arrest me, and the next time the ghost logic returns, you'll be the ones drowning." Instead of a cell, Zola was placed in a high-security consultant suite. The city was in the middle of a crisis larger than a pipe leak. Ethelgard was currently negotiating a century-long water rights contract with the Titan Corporation, a ruthless surface conglomerate. The lead negotiator for Ethelgard was a woman named Zola Vance, coincidentally sharing Zola's last name, though Sarah was from the High Cloud districts. Sarah was brilliant but lacked technical depth. "The Titan Corporation is offering us a freshwater pipeline in exchange for 60% of our geothermal energy," Sarah explained to the board. "It's a steep price, but we're a thirsty city." Zola, sitting in the back of the room in a borrowed, ill-fitting suit, was given the digital blueprints of the Titan pipeline. As her eyes scanned the thousands of pages of technical specs, her spark flared. She saw something the city's high-paid lawyers had missed. "Wait," Zola said, her voice cutting through the chatter of the council. "This contract isn't a partnership. It's a foreclosure." The room went quiet. Thorn, who was still present and nursing his bruised ego, groaned. "Here we go again. The scrubber has an opinion." Zola ignored him and stood up, projecting the blueprints onto the center table. She zoomed in on the intake valves. "These valves are made of a chromium-nickel alloy. On the surface, they're indestructible. But in our high-salinity environment, they will undergo selective leaching. In exactly 18 months, the valves will seize. The contract states that if the hardware fails due to environmental degradation, Titan takes ownership of the power plant to oversee repairs." She looked at Zola Vance. "They aren't selling us water. They're buying our power plant for the price of some cheap valves." The doors swung open, and the Titan delegation arrived. They were led by Marcus Thorn, the chief engineer's cousin. It was a web of nepotism that reached from the surface to the seabed. Marcus was a man who moved like a shark in a silk suit. "We heard there's a delay," Marcus said, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Zola. He smirked. "I see you've brought your domestic staff to the meeting. How quaint." Zola Vance stood taller. "This is our technical auditor, Zola Vance. She has some concerns about the alloy choices in Section 9.2. Marcus's smirk didn't falter, but his eyes turned cold. "Section 9.2 is industry standard. I'm sure a diver wouldn't be familiar with surface-level metallurgy." Zola realized that Marcus wasn't just using technical jargon to hide the truth. He was using a specific dialect of corporate high script, a language designed to be legally ambiguous. Fortunately, Zola's father had spent his nights in the slums teaching her the old codes, the languages of the builders who came before the corporations. Zola switched tactics. She addressed the Titan legal team in their dialect, her voice sharp and precise. "Mr. Thorn, Article 11 of your own charter forbids the use of planned obsolescence in essential infrastructure deals with sovereign maritime cities. If we sign this, and I submit my findings to the Global Maritime Council, Titan won't just lose this deal. You'll lose your license to operate in this hemisphere." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a submarine. Marcus's face went from pale to a dangerous shade of crimson. That night, Marcus Thorne tried a different approach. He met Zola in the shadows of the Spire's garden. "You're smart, Zola," he said, holding out a digital credit chip. "There's enough on here to buy your father a new set of lungs and a villa on the surface for your brother. Just sign off on the audit. Say the alloy is acceptable with monitoring. Everyone wins." Zola looked at the chip. It was more money than she had ever seen. She thought of Elias coughing in the dark and Leo's stained hands. "If I take this," Zola said quietly, "my family will live in luxury while the rest of the Rust Belt suffers when the water supply ends. My father didn't teach me how to weld so I could build a golden cage. He taught me so I could fix what was broken." She crushed the chip under her boot. "The audit stays." Titan didn't take rejection well. 2 days before the final vote, a catastrophic failure occurred in the filtration plant of the Rust Belt. It was a clear act of retaliation. Toxic brine was being pumped into the residential sectors. A suspicious communications blackout delayed the Spire's security forces. Screams echoed from the slums as the water levels rose. Zola didn't wait for permission. She grabbed her old scrubber gear and dove into the dark, churning water of her childhood home. She wasn't alone. Word had spread. Hundreds of scrubbers, inspired by the girl who spoke back to the Spire, followed her. They formed a human chain in the freezing depths, using their specialized tools to manually override the floodgates. Zola arrived at the main shut-off valve, only to find Titan saboteurs had welded it shut. She had 3 minutes of oxygen left. Through the murky water, she saw her father's face in her mind. She saw the spark she thought she had lost. She didn't use her brush. She used a thermal lance she'd modified herself. She cut through the sabotage with the precision of a surgeon. As the gates slammed shut and the toxic water receded, the people of the Rust Belt didn't cheer for the director or the negotiator. They cheered for Zola. She surfaced to find Zola Vance waiting on the dock. Sarah wasn't there to arrest her. She was there with a camera crew. The whole city had seen the accident. Titan's mask had slipped. The final negotiation was no longer a negotiation. It was a surrender. With the evidence of Titan's sabotage and Zola's technical audit, Ethelgard stripped Titan of its water rights and seized their local assets as reparations. Director Halloway stood before the city. "We were blind. We looked at our laborers as the hands of this city, forgetting they are also its mind. Effective immediately, we are creating the Department of Infrastructure Oversight, and its first director will be Zola Vance." Zola stood at the podium. She still had grease under her fingernails. "I'll take the job," she said. "But I will only accept the job if my first act is to provide every worker in the Rust Belt with a full education and a seat at the table. We are done being invisible." 1 year later, the Azure Spire looked different. The glass floors were still there, but the people walking them were diverse. The submerged slums were being transformed into a high-tech low city, with its filtration systems and schools. Zola's father, Elias, sat in a sunlit room in the Spire. His breathing steady and clear thanks to the new medical tech Zola had helped develop. Leo was no longer a student. He was a lead designer, building a new type of thermal vent that would never clog. Zola visited the docks every Tuesday. She didn't have to scrub anymore, but she did it anyway for 1 hour a week. "To keep my eyes sharp," she'd tell her assistants. The story of the scrubber who broke a corporation spread across the globe. Zola received a message from a girl in a distant mining colony. "How did you do it? How did you make them see you?" Zola sat at her desk, looking out at the vast, indomitable ocean. She typed back a single message. "They didn't give me a seat at the table. I understood the table better than the people who built it. Don't wait for them to see you. Make it impossible for them to look away. Knowledge is the only thing they can't take from you in the dark." As she sent the message, she saw a group of young scrubbers heading down for their shift. They didn't look like shadows anymore. They looked like architects. And for the first time in her life, Zola Vance wasn't just surviving. She was leading.